Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Khalid. But today is the 16th of July 2024 and the 9th of Muharram-ul-Haram, and of course this is going to be the first story of our day, the importance of 9th Muharram-ul-Haram, the importance of the sacrifices that were rendered by a small group of Muslims, whether it be Hazrat Imam Hussein or Hazrat Imam Hassan, or the families that were severely tortured. But what do these sacrifices represent in this day and age for the Muslims across the world? What is Hussainiyat? What is the philosophy behind all of these sacrifices? This is what we will be discussing in detail in our first segment. Then we are going to discuss the day 284 of the Palestine war conflict between Israel and Palestine. A lot has happened, a lot needs to be seen as far as especially the truce or the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Palestine that is said to be en route in the right direction. This said, the number of Palestinians which are being butchered are increasing with every passing day. 38,713 people have been killed, while around 89,166 have been wounded. Also, the specialized cancer hospitals or other hospitals are being destroyed by Israel. So are the schools, so are all other establishments that the Palestinians could hide in. Even the camps, the shelters where they are staying are being bombarded by the Israelis. If this is not genocide, if this is not ethnic cleansing, then I don't understand the meaning of these two terms. This and more will be discussed in our second story. Then we are going to discuss about Shabanamahmood, who becomes the United Kingdom's first woman Muslim Lord Chancellor. Now, this has happened in a historic ceremony at the Royal Courts of Justice. She was sworn in as the first female Muslim Lord Chancellor, and of course this is a huge milestone in British history. We'll be talking about that in our first story. Then melting polar ice caps that are causing Earth to spin slow, and this is of course going to affect not only our whole spin around the different other planets in the solar system, but also our relationship with the moon and others, and a lot of scientific calculations are also going to be affected by that. Finally, we are going to talk about scientists who have found a cave on the moon, an underground cave not far from where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed 55 years ago. It's a huge cave. They say it could have been there since a very long time, but a lot of people also say that this could be one of the caves where future human population could live under the right circumstances. Will that actually happen? This is another thing whatsoever, but nevertheless an interesting discovery. We'll begin with our first story, and that concerns the 9th Muharram-ul-Haram, its importance, its significance, and the philosophy behind the sacrifices. We've been joined by Imran Sandhu. He's a religious scholar. Imran Sandhu, thank you very much. All right. We'll also be joined by another guest a bit later in the day. When we come to the 9th of Muharram-ul-Haram, let's just give you an outlay of what happened in the first month of the Islamic calendar. The first of Muharram is the death anniversary of Umar ibn Khattab. Second of Muharram, Hussein ibn Ali enters Karbala and establishes his camp. Yazid's forces are presently surrounding him. On the 7th of Muharram, after Yazid's order, access to water is banned for Hussein ibn Ali. And on the 8th of Muharram, the martyrdom of Zainul Abidin anhu, son of Hussein ibn Ali anhu, was the only survivor of the battle of Karbala. Imran Sandhu, thank you very much to have joined us. The meaning of Muharram, Imran, is forbidden, referring to the fact that it is one of the 4 sacred months in which warfare is forbidden. What are the other major significant aspects of the term Muharram-ul-Haram?
Muharram is the first month of Islamic calendar. So, and this first month of Islamic calendar also denotes as to be Muharram, that makes fighting amongst the Muslims or even with the non-Muslims haram. This is from the point of view even before the advent of Islam in Arabia. This Muharram was a sacred month. It was a sacred month for the people of Makkah, Medina, Arab, as well as it was a sacred month for Jews as well, Jews and Christians, because they connect the defeat of Pharaoh from Musa alayhi salam on the 10th of Muharram. So Muharram not only gives us a message to resolve the differences between people, give peace a chance. It's a month of peace, but also gives us a message of victory over uh, over tyranny and tyrant forces.
Imran, I'd like to understand for our viewers as well, what are the key events in Islamic history which unfolded during Muharram, starting with the first. I did give a little bit of introduction of what happened in the first 8 days of Muharram, but I'd like your point of view as well. And how have these shaped the future of Muslim Ummah? Also, what is the significance of this day, that is the 9th of Muharram, as far as Islamic history is concerned?
So the two main key events that we can mark with Muharram is the migration or hijrah of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, from Makkah to Medina, which marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. So much so, there are some weak narrations, historical narrations that also say that this world was also created on the first of Muharram. Adam alayhi salam was, according to some weak narrations, was also sent to the world in Muharram. The second, the most, and the events after the sad demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the death of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is also on the first of Muharram, and on the 10th of Muharram, the Imam of the Ummah, Hussein ibn Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, was also got his martyrdom on the 10th of Muharram. So these are the main events. This is also said that Nuh alayhi salam also got saved his sons and many on the ship on 10th of Muharram.
There is a lot of significance, relevance to all of the sacrifice that happened in these first days of Muharram-ul-Haram. And to discuss that as well, we've been joined in the studios by Dr. Syed Zaheer Abbas Kazmi Sahab. He is a scholar and an educationist. Dr. Sahab, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Sahab, when it comes to Muharram, we all know the nitty-gritties, the small aspects of it, the sacrifices. How does the Muslim world, and how should the Muslim world observe this sacred month? Secondly, how does the heroism and resistance of Al-Hussein ibn Ali inspire the struggle of the current Muslims?
First of all, I am grateful, rather humbled that I am called to discuss on this sacred event. Being a student of social sciences, I do believe that this great sacrifice has a lot of lessons for us, and the Muslim world, other than just rituals which we usually do observe, these rituals do have lessons for us, lessons for the individuals and lessons for the nations as well. So when we observe Muharram-ul-Haram, we shall also keep it in mind that what was the objective or goal of this movement by Imam Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. So if you look at the bigger canvas, so when Imam Hussein ibn Ali left Medina, he has written a letter to his own brother Muhammad Hanafiya, that what is the reason for my movement, that why I am leaving Medina for Makkah and then for Karbala. He very clearly said that I am leaving Medina not because of some government or because of some some power or something like that, some material being. Rather, he said, I am leaving Medina for the sake of Islah, for the sake of corrections in the Ummah of my Jad or my great grandfather, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if you look at that time, the history, what Yazid was conveying and what he was practicing and he was trying to impose, he was very openly saying that there was no Islam, there was no way, there was no revelation. It was all the game of Banu Hashim, and they all made this game to have the power and have the government. So by having these words, he was in fact massacring the Islamic principles, the Islamic roots, the Islamic values. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam stood for Islam, stood for Deen. So his goal was very great. It was not a small goal, and for that great goal he had to make a bigger sacrifice. You better know, the greater the goal, the greater effort you have to put on. So that was the basic reason. So for the same cause for which Imam Hussein alayhi salam stood, we shall know the reflections, we shall have those reflections in our character. When he was asked for bay'ah by the governor of Medina, Walid bin Utbah, that Imam Hussein alayhi salam shall confess, or he shall do the bay'ah on the hand of Walid bin Utbah for Yazid, Imam Hussein alayhi salam said, the person like me cannot have the bay'ah for the person like Yazid. It is not because the game of personalities, it is not his personal problem.
It is what they represented, basically.
It is what he represented, it is what he was responsible for, and that is Islam. His grandfather, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, he came up with Islam, and he brought Islam in Arab and whole world, and Imam Hussein alayhi salam had a great responsibility to again save Islam when it was in trouble. So we also, and he said very clearly in his letter to Muhammad Hanafiya's brother, that I am going for amr bil ma'ruf, that is, I am going for the right things that were revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Holy Prophet, and he preached and he practiced, and I am going for nahi anil munkar, which those things which are against the Islamic principles, which are not the virtues, rather they are the false things which are being practiced, I am going to eradicate those. So we being individually shall look into ourself, our inner self, that what are, it means we shall purify ourselves from our inner side, that what we are doing right and what we are doing wrong, and collectively as a society, as a nation, what is our responsibility, that we shall learn the lesson that Imam Hussein alayhi salam, with a very little army and with his family, he stood against oppression.
He stood against tyranny, he stood against all that was wrong. All right. Coming to you, Imran, Hazrat Imam Hussein anhu not only was a person of might, of right, but also a larger than life icon when it comes to confrontation or resistance. What does his resistance represent now in this age, and what did his resistance represent at the moment when he and his family members were sacrificing their lives for a cause?
So the resistance of Hazrat Imam Hussein alayhi salam radiyallahu anhu represents the ultimate stand for justice, truth, righteousness, and for the will of the people. His confrontation with Yazid's oppressive regime symbolizes the struggle against tyranny and bypassing the will of the people. In Islam, the will of the people is important. The will of the people is important. The reason being that to remove all kind of disagreement that who is the best person who can lead the nation. So Imam Hussein radiyallahu ta'ala anhu endeavored, and his peaceful protest, I don't think that he was out there for a fight, because a person will not go out for a fight, a real fight, a war. It was not a kind of a real battle or a war that he was going on. It was a peaceful fight he and the family of the Prophet ﷺ, with all the ladies and the children. When we go on a battle, we go without our ladies and children and older people. Everybody accompanied him. He wanted to negotiate the real meaning, the real spirit of Islam from this person known as Yazid, who history writes as a tyrant. So his fight was there for the real democracy that Islam upholds. That the righteous people should lead the nation through the will of the people that Allah puts in the people's hearts. So this was the real Husseinian, I would say, the system that Prophet, peace be upon him, said. Look, when Prophet was going from this world, he appointed Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala an as the Imam of Masjid al-Nabi, because Imam is to be appointed, is a post that needs an appointment. And after appointing him as an Imam, he said, now if the people now inshallah, the people, Allah will make him my Khalifa through the will of the people. This is a hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So here we can see the will of the people was something else, and that Imam Hussein was representing the will of the people, and the will of the person was, will of the power and will of the person was with Yazid. Like he was just one man army who was trying to lead whole of the Muslim Ummah, and that was not possible. And this same incident ultimately led, he died, and his son, Yazid's son, whose name was Muawiyah, he stepped down and he said that I am not going to sit on a throne that is whose hands are filled with blood of Imam Hussein radiallahu anhu. So this is what I say, his resistance.
All right, this is what his resistance meant. Thank you very much, Imran Sandhu, to have joined us online to discuss the importance of the Muharram, and of course with reference to the 9th of Muharram-ul-Haram. All right, coming to you, Dr. Saab, when you look at Ashura, the first word, or the first thing that comes to your mind is sacrifice, or the element of sacrifice. What is this concept of sacrifice, especially in reference to Muharram-ul-Haram? Also, what is the spirit of this holy month that we need to revere, understand and imbibe? The third part, of course, is something that we all talk about but maybe don't understand much. What is Hussainiyat?
Umar Sahab, basically the sacrifice of Imam Hussein and his family and his companions. In general, a sacrifice is that you forgo something or you give something for a greater cause, for a better cause. If you look at the sacrifice concept in religion, and if you look at Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, and then Imam Hussein alayhi salam, so this sacrifice, the concept of this sacrifice is not personal gains, as Mr. Imran has very clearly pointed out. It was not the Game of Thrones, okay? It was the Imam Hussein alayhi salam stood as a savior of the religion, Deen Islam, and it is in the Quran it is very clearly said, Inna Deena Indallahi Islam, okay? So right from the Adam till the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and till the day of resurrection, Islam is the only religion that has to sustain, and for that Allah has chosen some people who come and save the religion, who become the saviors. Now, what is the lesson for us or reflection for us out of this sacrifice? This was the second part of your question, I believe. Look, Imam Hussein alayhi salam has given us a very clear inspiration, and many of the Islamic movements in the Islamic world and other than Islamic worlds have got that inspiration, that wherever there is oppression, whatever the magnitude of that oppression or tyranny, you shall stand against the tyranny and you shall be with the oppressed. You shall be holding hands with the oppressed, and you shall be side with them.
All right.
So look at the revolution, Islamic revolution of Iran 1979, or be it the recent Arab Springs, be it the Mahatma Gandhi, his movement, and he also clearly explicitly said that I I am inspired from Karbala, be it your African leader, I am missing his name.
Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela. He also said, I am inspired from Karbala. Malcolm X, 1952, and the movement got gain in 60s and 70s in America. You see the civil rights movement for black Americans. He was also inspired by Karbala. So Karbala, or this sacrifice of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, this has a reflection for us that we shall stand against the oppressed without any discretion of the religion or race or of the kind or caste or whatever.
It is a philosophy that needs to be imbibed, that needs to be understood and needs to be followed. Thank you very much, Dr. Syed Zaheer Abbas Kazmi Sahab, scholar and academician, to have joined us, to have talked to us, because a lot of us don't understand the real essence of what this holy month of Muharram-ul-Haram stands for, of what those sacrifices stand for. And the whole concept is very simple, but it needs to be understood and needs to be taught properly so that people understand it and they are not different, versions of what the whole movement stood for in this holy month of Muharram-ul-Haram. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us.
I'm grateful. Thank you very much.
Let's come to our second story, and that concerns the Israel-Palestine conflict. This conflict has now entered its 284th day as we speak, but the atrocities continue. The whole movement that Israel is trying to move forward with to they claim as much of land in Palestine, whether it be in the West Bank or whether it be in Gaza, to push people out of their current habitations just so that later they can occupy these very lands. This is the basic, or seems to be the basic aim for that. But the butchering, the killing, the merciless killing of all those Palestinians that has been going on since the 7th of October is also a lesson that the world doesn't seem to have understood to date, because the fact remains that as we speak, more and more Palestinians are being butchered, more are being injured, and the actual numbers, if we speak about it, as per a Lancet report, talks about more than 186,000, because there are scores of Palestinians whose bodies have not been found because all of the infrastructure damage that has been done since the 7th of October. The rubble is immense, the deaths are huge in number, and all the destruction is immense as well. To talk about different aspects of that, because we try to cover Palestine as much as we can through different guests, we have a very regular guest in our studios. He is none other than Ambassador Jauhar Saleem, former Foreign Secretary and also President of the IRS. Thank you very much, Jauhar Sahab, to have joined us. I would always like to start with the latest casualties of what has been happening, whether it will be the what happened in Nuseirat camp, which killed 11 people, including 5 children. UNRWA says its head office has completely been destroyed by the Israelis. OCHA documents 3 Israeli mass casualty attacks along with 5 other strikes in the 3 days leading up to the 14th of this month, the deadliest of which was the attack on the Al-Mawasi displacement camp, which killed at least 90 Palestinians. And then the list goes on, and the fact that the Israeli government is openly supporting these strikes directly or indirectly. What are you foreseeing? Till when will this continue? Will the ceasefire agreement, if and when it does happen, will that lead to a pause or a stoppage of these barbarities?
Yes, it's very unfortunate that we have seen actually intensifying of Israeli military strikes in recent days. And very indiscriminate, relentless strikes that have resulted in so much killings, 90 people killed in just one particular strike. Now what is happening is the Israelis, in terms of that particular strike, were claiming that it was aimed at assassinating Mohammed Daif. He's one of the 3 top leaders there. In fact, one of them has already been assassinated, Marwan Issa, and now the 2 which happened, like these are the top leaders. Marwan Issa was like a deputy leader, military leader, Mohammed Daif and Yahya Sinwar. So I think what the Israelis are trying to do during this phase, while intense negotiations continue, Bill Burns, the director of CIA, he is the point person from the US administration side, and the Israeli Foreign Intelligence Chief is the point person from the Israeli side, and the Egyptians and Qataris are the other facilitators. Now, since May, as we know, the negotiations have been sort of, because at the end of May, Biden proposed a plan, which was a 3-phase plan. And basically what it called for was a pause, first a pause, which would last about 6 weeks or more. And during that period, and there would be some exchange of, hostages and the Palestinian prisoners. And then during that period, they would negotiate a permanent ceasefire. And during the second phase, there would be more than like the rest of all the rest of the hostages were to be released. And from the Israeli side, then during that phase also there was talk of some sort of an interim government being set up, which would not be Hamas, and and also there was a talk that Israeli operations would continue. That was one of the sticking points. The Israeli military operations, Israel insisted that they would continue in the second phase.
Till the last moment, they are still insisting that they want to continue their operation in Gaza.
Exactly, even once that plan comes into action. So, and there were 29 points raised by the Hamas side, which were all rejected, all of them, categorically by the Israelis. So that's why I think it has protracted to this point. But now it is in a decisive phase. But while it is in a decisive phase, Israel is trying two things. One, they're using this time period to have some of the most devastating strikes, trying to destroy the command and control system of Hamas, and trying to take out as many of their top leaders as possible. And while doing that, because that has been Netanyahu's style all along, he does not care anything about the civilian casualties, the innocent lives being lost, the sufferings that the Palestinians are facing there. He does not care at all, because what he wants to come out as some sort of a winner out of this. Although there is now intense pressure on both sides. On the Israeli side, there are thousands of people demonstrating every day in Tel Aviv and other cities now. But on the other side as well, Yahya Sinwar, who's actually perhaps the person overall in control within Gaza, while the political leadership is in Qatar, Ismail Haniyeh. There's a lot of pressure on him as well. There have been a lot of media reports, and some very credible ones, that now many of the Hamas commanders have been calling upon him to that the toll that these Israeli strikes are now taking, it's probably beyond and particularly because they're very concerned about the suffering of the people there, the innocent lives that are being lost. So I think that because of this pressure on both sides, and then the fact that the negotiations have entered a decisive phase, we are probably, possibly just weeks away from some, at least a temporary truce of 6 weeks, during which then the negotiation will resume again, and then of course they would negotiate a longer ceasefire. But during this period, and that is the tragedy of it, Israelis, particularly Netanyahu, he does not care at all about how many casualties of innocent civilians happen, what they call as a collateral damage. And that is the unfortunate, because some of the recent estimates, the devastation that has taken place, not just in terms of human life, but also human suffering, as well as the destruction of physical infrastructure.
Of course.
The whole of Gaza has been literally transformed into a rubble. And
to remove that rubble will cost an enormous amount of money and enormous amount of dedication and time as well. But the fact is, will the world stand together? That is a huge question altogether as well, as to whenever and howsoever the war ends, will the world be backing Palestine to help them regain or rebuild all the structures that have been destroyed?
Yeah, I think that is, in my view, that might be the relatively easier part.
Really?
Because you see, so far as money is concerned, right? Once this ends, that is where, because a lot of countries are feeling very guilty, there's a lot of pressure on many Western European governments from their people, from the public. Intense pressure, as we've seen the huge demonstrations and the public opinion surveys, and the statements that we've seen coming from many European leaders and leaders in Latin America and sort of, and even from America. Because of that guilt and because of the previous history of it, what we have seen, that whenever you have seen conflicts like that, what the Americans do is they ask the Europeans to then pitch in.
But even when it comes to the Europeans, Ambassador Saab, there has been a huge outcry in this latest spate of attacks that have targeted schools, that have targeted other buildings and embankments where Palestinians were present. And Germany, for example, has taken out a very, very strong worded statement as far as this is concerned.
Definitely, Germany, other European countries, and some we have seen, they have already taken certain measures which were unprecedented, like, for example, recognizing Palestine.
Spain, for example.
Spain, Ireland, other and countries which sort of, imposed embargoes on, like shipments of any type of military supplies to Israel. And many other actions as well, their voting pattern within the United Nations, in terms of the Security Council resolutions against Israel. Against the Brazilian president has come up with a very strong statement, Lula da Silva. So that is happening. Do you see, this is increasing pressure, of course, and the statement from the United Nations representatives there, who are involved in relief works.
UNRWA, OCHA, and so many others. I mean, Francesca Albanese, who has been taking out statement after statement to, describe in detail what is happening.
Yeah, and we already know that ICJ ruling is there, the United Nations Security Council resolutions are there. So once I think this sort of, the truce happens, after that, I think that you'd see the pledges of assistance would be coming from a lot of different quarters.
Will Netanyahu or his team ever be held accountable?
Now that is the $1 million question. I think that would be very hard to see happen. Happening. The fact is, how the U.S. Protects Israel. Even Biden, because of the intense pressure there has been on him. On the one hand, he has been spearheading these negotiations, the back channel, and negotiations with Israel as well, in terms of the conduct of these operations. But on the other side, as we know, what type of statements he has recently come up with, because you see, the problem for the problem for Biden is he's very close to the elections now.
He calls himself a Zionist.
Yeah, in a recent statement. But we have to remember, this is not the first time he's done that. Although this has gotten a lot of coverage, he has said that on previous occasions as well, and then he clarified it as well. Okay, let's see. What is Zionism? Zionism was a philosophy which started in this sort of a movement rather, which started in the late 19th century. Amongst other, it was basically like spearheaded by a philosopher Theodore. And started in Central and Eastern European countries, but then it sort of, gained momentum in the UK and the US subsequently as well. Now, what does it say? It basically says that, Israel, the Jews are a nation, regardless of wherever they are, and they have a right to self-determination and right to a nation state. And for that nation state, they need to use the territories which correspond to the sort of to the historical Israel that they had, and it was decided that basically the territories would be, at that point it was under the Ottomans in the late 19th century. Subsequently, when after the First World War, it got the UK started controlling it, and then the Balfour Declaration, and eventually it happened. But you see, after 1948. This was revised. So now Zionism says that Zionism is all about protecting Israel and its right to exist on those lands, although they have been illegally occupied from the Palestinians. So it is in these terms that Biden says, rather, again and again.
Now, Ambassador Saab, when you talk of the US, I'd like to take out 2 or 3 statements and ask your point of view. Joe Biden, we were talking of him, he claims that he has done more for the Palestinian community than anybody, and he's coming for a lot of flack because of that. Then we've got J.D. Vance, the new Republican vice presidential nominee, tells Fox News that US President Joe Biden allowed Israel's war on Gaza to continue for too long. on a superficial level, this seems like he is advocating for peace. In fact, it is quite the opposite, because in November last year he had written a letter to Biden urging him not to implement special immigration protection for Palestinians, calling them a population of potentially radicalized individuals. He also rejected any limits on military aid to Israel. Who is more pro-Israel then? Is it the Republicans? Is it the Democrats? When you talk of US, will the support for Israel and the Israeli government, irrespective of the violence that or ethnic cleansing that they are involved in, ever cease, or will it be related to some kind of a reduction in their barbarism in the future? Or will the US, as is very evident in the last few months, continue to support Israel come what may?
Yeah, as I have been saying in my previous commentaries as well, for Israel there's a bipartisan support in the US. It is Israel's protection and security and sort of and support, literally unconditional and unlimited support that the US provides to Israel. It's a cornerstone of the US foreign policy. Now, in terms of, if we want to see the subtle differences between the two parties here, Republicans, and that's a very interesting point. The Jews in America, who are very powerful in the Jewish lobby, we know how powerful they are. They traditionally vote for Democrats. Even now in recent surveys, like there was 67% of the Jewish community in the US were going to support, they were supporting Biden rather than Trump. Now, but Biden doesn't want to lose that support. And on the other hand, Republicans want to get some of that vote, not just because of the number of that vote, but also the influence that they wield. And Vance has tried that, through different statements recently. Now, what has happened after this assassination attempt on Trump? That vote has shifted a bit. And I think J.D. Vance now thinks that this is the time to sort of
capitalize on it.
To capitalize on it. But on the other hand, Biden, and that is why Biden has come up with this Zionist, that I am a Zionist statement. Why? Because he does not want that, because the vote to shift to a greater degree. And we have to remember that there are pressures on Biden that the Republicans don't face. What pressures? I mean, the Democratic constituency in the US includes the young, the progressives, the Muslim Americans, the Arab Americans, generally, majority of these population groups, and the women. So, and these are the very groups which have been calling for sort of ending the brutalities taking place in Gaza. So there's much more pressure on Biden rather than Republicans to do something, and that is why what he's doing is two-pronged. On the one hand, he really desperately wants to have a ceasefire well before the elections. Elections are in November, and sort of and September. In September they would be having their party convention where he'd be sort of in September he has the second debate, technically the party after the party convention. So the point is, well before that he would want to see that, and that is why that diplomacy has intensified. On the other hand, he by coming up with these statements, he is also telling the Jewish, that vote which he now sees slipping away a bit, that look, I am your ardent supporter as much as ever, So he's playing, he's on a tightrope, so to speak.
All right.
The Republicans have greater freedom. But if Republicans come to power, we have to remember what Trump did in his previous term. The Abraham Accords, his son-in-law is Jewish, and his son-in-law was not only his son-in-law, he was a major advisor in his government with a lot of influence and power. So I think on the whole, generally we see that Republicans are even sort of, more ardent in their support for Israel and sort of Zionism in general. And by saying all these things, like Biden is trying to sort of, just neutralize sort of, the impact of some of the statements coming from the Republican side.
Or but Ambassador Saab, what I kind of infer from it is that it's all politics, but at the cost of human suffering. And the way we have seen human suffering in Palestine is unaccounted for, at least in this last few decades. And again, I need to refer to that because it seems so strange that a race that itself been subjugated to a lot of violence post the Second World War or even during the Second World War can be the oppressor this time and do more or less different machinations or different methodologies to do more or less the same thing that they were victims of. So it's a very strange analogy that I see. It's a very strange event or unfolding of events that I see, and I don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks or in the next few months as far as at least these Palestinians are concerned, because Israel will always get their support, but I don't know what is going to happen to the Palestinians.
No, it is a tragedy that we see. And like you said, the Jewish people who had suffered so much during the Second World War, and their leadership as well. But now, like they are involved in something, at least their leadership is, which is totally, like in contravention to the very principles that they espoused, for a long, long time. And the type of suffering that they have caused on the Palestinians, particularly during this conflict, which has now lasted 9 months. I think this is like, in many ways unprecedented in modern history. But also the reaction that has come about all over the world, in many ways, that is also unprecedented.
Well, I'd like to just end this segment with a one-worded answer from you. Has what has transpired in Palestine in the last 9 months changed global politics for better or for worse? One-worded answer.
Yeah. I don't think it has really impacted global politics, but what it has impacted is the world public opinion.
All right.
And that has shifted.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Saab. Ambassador Jauhar Saleem, former Foreign Secretary as well as the current President of IRS, to have joined us and to have come all the way to the studios to discuss Palestine. And we will be requesting you to come more and more to discuss different issues that pertain to, especially when it comes to international affairs, because you're a master at that with all the decades of experience that you have. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. Let's come to our last 3 stories very, very quickly. The first concerns Shabanamahmood, who has become the United Kingdom's first woman Lord Chancellor. This was happening in a historic ceremony at the Royal Court of Justice. This is a milestone as far as British history is concerned. She took her oath on the Holy Quran, and by law the Lord Chancellor is the Secretary of State for Justice and the Minister of Crown, responsible for the administration of courts and legal aid in England as well as in the Wales. She is known for her shrewd advocacy and deep knowledge of professional ethics, and she expressed gratitude and commitment and reflected on her journey from a young girl in Small Heath, Birmingham, working in her parents' corner shop, to her current role. She said, being the first is both a privilege and a burden. Getting this right can open doors for future generations, showing that even the oldest titles of the land are within reach for us all. Very strong words, and congratulations, Ma'am Shabanamahmood. But next, we are going to come to a cave that has been discovered. In fact, before with the cave, let's come to the melting ice and the melting ice caps over the Earth's spin. Now, it is very well known that as far as climate crisis goes, time is of the essence. Now, a study on Monday shows that the melting of the polar ice caps is causing our planet to spin more slowly. We know that there is a certain rotation and a time for the rotation that the Earth takes, but that is slowing down, and it is increasing the length of days at an unprecedented rate. The paper was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. It shows that water flowing from Greenland and Antarctica is resulting in more mass around the equator. Co-author told us that it's like when a figure skater does a pirouette, first holding the arms close to her body and then stretching them out. Initial fast rotation becomes slower because the masses move away from the axis of rotation, increasing physical inertia. Now, between the year 1900 and today, climate has caused days to become around 0.8 milliseconds longer, and under the worst case scenario of high emissions, climate alone would be responsible for making days 2.2 milliseconds longer than by the year 2100 compared to the same baseline. And this is a very, very great deal and needs to be catered to by handling climate change. Finally, a cave has been discovered on the moon that could be home for humans in the future. This is at least 100 meters deep, and a lot of scientists say could be this ideal place to build a permanent base for any future human colony. It is just one of the hundreds of caves that are hidden in an underground, undiscovered world. Of course, all the countries are in a rush to start habitation on the moon, and this could be maybe one little point that will push them further in this direction. It's interesting, it's scientific, and of course we've always thought of and seen in different shows and films how the human population wants to be populated on other planets, on other areas of the solar system and the galaxy and the universe as well. So maybe this could happen in the next couple of decades. We might have a small colony on the moon living in these little caves as well. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new stories, segments that pertain to us here in Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.